Welcome back to the channel. This is A.R Shaw, A.R Shaw TV. I am the author of the book Trap History, Atlanta Culture, and the Global Impact of Trap Music. The first book that details the history of trap music and Atlanta culture. So definitely pick that up. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let's definitely have dialogue on what we discussed today. All right, I'm going to get right into it. They should have some type of hip hop history course in all schools, especially in Atlanta, because I think Atlanta is so important to where hip hop is today that I think the kids coming up, I think they really need a refresher course on how we got to where we are today. Now, there's a generation that's adults right now they've only seen Atlanta on top, right? So think about it. Atlanta's been on top, and let's say, okay, OutKast came out in 1994, 93 with Players Ball, and the album came out in 1994, Southern Playalistic. The people who were born in 1993 and 94, they're now adults. They're in their 30s, right? So all of those people who were born in 94, they've never had an existence of seeing Atlanta not being on top in hip hop. So it's like they have this whole idea that Atlanta has always won when it came to hip hop, and that's just not the case. Before OutKast came out in 1993 with Players Ball, and then the album again in 1994 with Southern Playalistic, there was regional hatred in hip hop. A lot of people don't talk about that now, but if you weren't from New York or California, it was hard to get national attention in hip hop. And that's because most of the major labels were in New York and most of the major labels were in California, specifically LA. Before social media, there were really only three shows where rap music was played. You had BET's Rap City, you had MTV's Yo MTV Raps, and then you had The Box. Those are the major three shows where you get where rap artists got national play for their music videos early on in hip hop, right? So if you couldn't get on those three shows, it's really highly unlikely that you were going to get any national attention. Case in point, Kilo Ali was arguably the biggest rapper in Atlanta before OutKast came out, right? Meaning that everybody in the city knew who Kilo Ali was. They knew his songs verbatim. You heard him in the clubs. You heard him at the skating rinks. Kilo Ali was the man, right? But nobody outside of 285 really knew who Kilo Ali was. That's because BET, again, Rap City, and Yo MTV Raps, they rarely played artists from New York or LA. Kilo Ali never had a video on Rap City. He never had a video on Yo MTV Raps. And that was just indicative of the time we were living in. Like if you were from Atlanta, the Kilo Ali's, the Raheem, the Dreams, the MC Shadis, those early rappers in Atlanta, they didn't get any national play because it was just it was a period where if you weren't from a certain region, if you weren't from a certain city, if you weren't on a certain label, you just wasn't going to get that mainstream attention. The only way that Atlantans got an opportunity to see other Atlantans and other rap artists from Atlanta was this guy named Arnell Starr. Arnell Starr was basically a guy who was he had a local show in Atlanta that came on every weekend, and he played all of Atlanta-based rap. And so that was the only time we could see a Kilo Ali. That was the only time that we could see a Raheem the Dream was when Arnell Starr played it on his show. And so that was kind of just where we were. That was the time period. And so Atlanta just wasn't it, right? Atlanta wasn't really a hot spot for hip hop during the 80s and the early 90s. OutKast comes out. They come out in 1993 with Players Ball, and that's the first time that you actually see Atlanta on Rap City, right? You see them driving a Cadillac on Campbellton Road. You see them in Decatur. They actually naming these places that's specific to Atlanta and the culture of Atlanta. And it's like, wow, this is what Atlanta represents. OutKast comes and it's like, man, they put out a masterful project with Southern Playalistic. Fast forward to 1995, the Source Awards. Now, for those who don't know what The Source is, The Source was pretty much the biggest mainstream hip hop magazine during that time. The Source was basically like if you wanted to, it was the Rolling Stones for hip hop. And so basically it was like the barometer of everything hip hop. Before, like I said, this is before social media, so we had to get all of our content from The Source when it came to hip hop. They began to do the Source Awards, which was basically awarding the top artists of the year. 1995, OutKast, they win New Artist of the Year at the Source Awards, which is held at Madison Square Garden in New York City. When OutKast won, they were booed by the New Yorkers, right? Basically, almost booed off the stage. That was the attempt to kind of boot them off the stage, right? Basically saying we don't like y'all music, we don't like what y'all represent. You know, y'all coming up here from y'all country. It was, you could feel it, right? You could feel it. They weren't, at the time, New York City and a lot of the fans and the hip hop fans in New York City, they weren't prepared for what OutKast represented in terms of bringing this whole Atlanta culture to the forefront. Andre gets on the mic and he says, the South got something to say. That pretty much opened the floodgates for Atlanta and Southern hip hop in general, right? Because after that statement that Andre made, that bold statement that the South got something to say, it was like, okay, it kind of woke up everybody in New York. It kind of woke up everybody in LA, specifically the record labels, right? Because the record labels are the ones who had the resources, they had the big budgets, and all of a sudden you see these record labels in New York and LA, they opening up the resources for artists in Atlanta, right? They signing artists from Atlanta. And so now you get a Little John, you get a T.I., you get a Jeezy, you get a Gucci, you get a Future, you get a Young Thug, you get Migos, you get 21 Savage, Future, you get Lil Baby, you get Gunna. All of this happened, and that's just only naming a few artists, because we got Ludacris. I mean, there's so many artists in Atlanta. It's probably like 100 prominent artists that's made it in Atlanta over the past 3 decades, right? But all of this opened up because OutKast, Andre, got on the mic and said, look, I'm tired of y'all hating on the South. I'm tired of y'all hating on Atlanta. I'm going to tell y'all right now, the South got something to say. And so when you talk about putting somebody on, yeah, Andre 3000, not really, he's not rapping as much as he did, 10, 15 years ago. But you got to always credit Andre, Big Boy, for putting on an entire region. Putting on an entire region where it's like you now can create this infrastructure in Atlanta where it's like this is a community now. It's a business community where a lot of people has gotten paid because Atlanta has a hip hop infrastructure. So that means when OutKast is successful, when Jeezy is successful, when Thug is successful, when everybody around who's in this infrastructure, they're successful as well. So you got the publicists getting paid, you got graphic designers getting paid, you got videographers getting paid, you got all these people getting paid because there's a hip hop infrastructure and a hip hop business community in Atlanta, right? But that was all opened up because of OutKast, right? Because of OutKast, because of Dungeon Family, Rico Wade, L.A. Reid, they all put in the work in the foundation and laid the foundation for people like Young Thug to kind of have this success that they've had today. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if Kilo Ali had come out in 2005 instead of 1990, Kilo Ali would be one of the biggest rappers that we have ever seen because he was that good in his prime, right? Kilo Ali was the guy, but he was almost too early to catch that wave. And he caught, and actually Organized Noise, Rico Wade, they signed him a few years after OutKast pretty much, blew up. But at that time, Kilo Ali, he was having personal problems, and he really never reached the height that he could have reached had he had come out, years later after the success of OutKast. Now, if you're just talking about like putting people on in terms of, saying that, it's a wrong statement all around, but we can go back and we can see that OutKast and Andre 3000 and Big Boy. They put on Killer Mike. You know, that was the first time we heard Killer Mike was on an OutKast album. I think it was called Snapping and Trapping. That was the first time you heard Killer Mike. That was on an OutKast project. And then Killer Mike and OutKast, they won a Grammy for the whole world. So these moments, you can't just say that this hasn't happened. We've seen Andre 3000 hop on a remix for DJ Unk, Walk It Out, which DJ Unk represented Big Unk, which is one of the top independent record labels in Atlanta. So it was really just a perplexing statement, all around by Thug. But again, it kind of shows you that a lot of people are disconnected to the history of what hip hop represents in the history of Atlanta. And so I just hope people really understand how this thing started, that there was regional hate in hip hop. And without OutKast, we wouldn't be where we are today in terms of Atlanta culture. So there we have it. Those are my thoughts. I want you guys to check out my book, Trap History, Atlanta Culture, and the Global Impact of Trap Music, because I actually go in depth and I really lay down this foundation of how Atlanta's music pretty much came to be. Definitely check that book out, Trap History, Atlanta Culture, and the Global Impact of Trap Music. Let me know your thoughts.